You argue, and I think plausibly, that Judaism is in a place where it's a non-missionary religion, really. There are converts to Judaism, especially in the Roman Empire, but it's a non-missionary religion that nonetheless has within it, and there are arguments about what Judaism is and so on, but certainly has within it the idea of a tolerant, all-embracing God, in a sense. Mm-hmm. But it's not in a position where it is it's operating within a polytheistic framework. It is a monotheistic people in a polytheistic world. And the polytheistic world, in a sense, is the ultimate expression of this non-zero sum idea, right? Where you have, first under Alexander the Great, and then certainly under the Romans, a period where everybody gets to say that their God is okay, and your God is okay, and maybe they're part of the same pantheon. Because we're all working together under this, as you said, this imperial platform, right? And then Christianity arrives.
Right. And in fact, I view the famous Christian values, like a love that extends beyond ethnic and national bounds, as fundamentally products of the cosmopolitan Roman milieu. Right. I think on the question of what Jesus said and what he didn't say, I think these kinds of things are not especially likely candidates for him to have said. I mean, it's kind of the opposite of the Jesus seminar. I guess the Jesus seminar tends to say he said all the good stuff.
Damn it, that was one of my questions.
Oh, sorry. But in interesting ways that I could elaborate on.
No, right. Well, it's interesting because the Jesus seminar, right, says that Jesus said the good things, you might say, the tolerant things, the nice things, love thy neighbor as thyself, etc., and didn't say the apocalyptic things, wasn't preaching the immediate coming of God's wrath and the elevation of Israel to dominance. And your argument is it's much more likely that it ran the other way, and that the message of brotherly love, tolerance, the Beatitudes, and so on was in fact forged in the crucible of the conversion of the Roman Empire, and in particular forged by St. Paul. Or as you might call him, Paul. Or even Saul. No, let's not get crazy. Right, so talk a little bit about Paul's role in the development of Christianity.
Yeah, I think, this view of what did and didn't come from Jesus is based partly on an appraisal of what is in the earliest gospel, Mark, what isn't. And you have to keep in mind that Paul's letters appear before any gospels, okay? So almost every Christian value Paul utters, you're seeing it there before you see it in any gospel, and a lot of them you don't see in the gospel that seems to follow immediately, but only in the later gospels. Anyway, my view of Paul is, and this is going to sound like a cynical kind of view, to me it's inspiring in ways I could articulate maybe, but I view him, I think he feels genuinely divinely inspired. I don't think he's cynical, but I think he's pragmatic, and he wants to build an international network of churches. And I think it's a network in a pretty literal sense because I argue that to do this, he needs to bring some kind of affluent people on board. They may provide the homes where the people meet and so on. And I think he's offering them in particular an international networking service so that they can visit when they're in another town. They can get plugged into a fellowship immediately. And
kind of Harvard Club.
It's a kind of a Harvard Club, yes. The Harvard Club is of course an improvement on the concept, but
progress is linear.
Inexorable. Yeah. Well, first of all, it's fairly clear that Paul is sometimes using the doctrine of brotherly love instrumentally. In the famous, wedding ceremony passage, love is patient, love is kind, love is not boastful. Pretty much everyone agrees he's trying to keep a church from afar. He's writing a letter to keep a church in line, to keep it together. And for him, brotherly love had that instrumental value, although I'm sure he believed in its moral truth, as I do. But I think it had this pragmatic value, and given that it was an international network of churches, I think it kind of follows that it was going to be a transnational brotherly love. And so that's my cynical sounding reading. I don't, like I said, I find it kind of inspiring because in my account, this is emerging naturally from the direction of history. These values, these things that move us closer to moral truth are emerging naturally from the expansion of social organization that is represented by the Roman Empire across national bounds, and these values didn't only show up in the Roman Empire. You see them in Buddhism, in Confucianism, and I would argue that in all three cases, they're kind of natural emanations of social development.